President Trump's Middle East trip has produced yet another major deal, this time an economic agreement with Qatar, valued at an estimated $1.2 trillion. The deal includes a joint declaration of cooperation, signaling increased American investment and deeper involvement in the region. But the question remains, how does this align with U.S. national security interests, especially considering Qatar's well-documented history of supporting entities linked to terrorism, some of which have targeted the United States? Joining me now to discuss this, Congressman Warren Davidson, a former Army Ranger who serves on both the House Foreign Affairs Committee and the Financial Services Committee. He represents Ohio's 8th Congressional District. Congressman Davidson, welcome back to Washington Watch. Thanks for joining us.
It's always an honor to join you, Tony. Thank you.
So the president's been over the Middle East all week. He's inked a number of deals, or at least the precursor to these deals. What do you make of President Trump's deal with Qatar?
Yeah, I think when he was in Saudi Arabia, he laid out really the premise is, commerce versus chaos. And, he had a really strong rebuke of the kind of neoconservative interventionism, nation building efforts. And I think it was an incredibly good speech. And then he's been doing that on the rest of his tour. So going to Qatar and laying out a future that promises a long, not just one deal, but a long relationship, I think sets a great tone for, a vision of mutual trade and respect for differences. My hope is that we keep pushing some of the values like, religious freedom and, frankly, safety for people that disagree in some of these places. Qatar's been a better place than, say, Syria. And so it was kind of shocking to see him embrace Syria's new president and leader, given his past as a terrorist leader and including, various names going back to the al-Nusra Front. A guy who spent his life as a terrorist is now the leader of Syria. Hopefully this path offers a peaceful future, not just for the United States and Syria, but for the people there.
I think you bring up some really important points when we talk about religious freedom, because there is an abundance of research that shows us that nations that embrace religious freedom also provide a foundation for other freedoms, economic prosperity and growth, and even security. When we look at this region of the world, especially Saudi Arabia, where the president started his trip, there's not a single church. The only thing allowed there is Islam. I mean, what's it going to take to see that as a part of the conversation? Because apparently the president did not bring those topics up during his visit.
Yeah, I'm not sure that the president is going to lead with those things in his administration, frankly. And, I think that, look, there's a balance to be struck here. We don't want to impose our views and values on others. It is a theocratic kingdom, so they certainly aren't touting themselves as some sort of democratic republic that some other places are. Saudi Arabia maybe has a different role because they have a clearly different government. But, in Syria, where you do have a long presence of diverse populations, minority people groups, and, people that have been Christians since there's been Christians, you want to really make sure you protect them. Unfortunately, Saudi Arabia, while they may have had Christians at one point, they're very deep underground. If they're still alive, they're being pretty quiet about it. And so you want to see a future that is tolerant of differences of religious faiths and views.
I agree with the president. We want to have commerce rather than chaos. And, engaging people in economic activity, I think, is extremely important. But I think we have to go into it with our eyes wide open. We go back 30 years, and there was discussions about China, most favored nation status for China, and that economic activity with that country would change them. But 30 years later, we see that economic activity, opening those markets, doing business with them, I would argue has changed, actually, American companies more than it's changed China.
Yeah, I mean, it clearly changed China, but it definitely has changed America as well. And, the theory has always been, people that do business together don't go to war. Well, I mean, Germany's largest trading partner at the start of World War II was France. So this certainly isn't undefeated kind of relationship here. It's a theory of international relations, and we shouldn't necessarily put total credence in it. But I tell you what, President Trump is onto here is endless wars haven't made us more free, and they haven't made us more safe. They have made us more burdened by debt, and they're made us less respected around the world. So it's really China has been the big beneficiary of all this interventionism that we've done in the end of the since the end of the Cold War. So we really haven't had a very focused foreign policy. And I think Donald Trump's right to center us on America first. America's resources should advance America's interest. And that's what he's over there doing. He's doing things with Saudi Arabia and Qatar that, promote peace, but also promote America's interest. And, if you can do that without fighting and waging wars, I think you're over the target.
I definitely agree with that, and I think we have proven that the nation building that was attempted really by the Bush administration was a failed approach, not much different than the Great Society, thinking that if we just change the environment and spend enough money, we'll change people, and it just doesn't work that way. I want to move on to really kind of the big domestic issue, and that is the reconciliation. It appears that we're inching a little bit closer to an agreement among Republicans that will advance, what has been called the president's one big beautiful bill. All right, as the Congress wraps up for this week with just 1 week to go before Memorial Day, the self-imposed deadline, where do we stand?
Well, it will be marketed and sold as one big beautiful bill that cuts $1.6 trillion in spending. But it's a little bit of a land of illusion here. The Congress we can control is the one we're in. And in the one we're in right now, unless they modify it further, it spends more money, not less. So, it'd be nice to see a bill that at least while we're in control, spends less money, because we can't even control who's going to be in a future Congress, let alone whether they're going to follow through with this plan that supposedly binds them to spend less. We know that Congress is really good at ignoring previous Congresses. So those often turn out to be hollow promises. The tax code implications are pretty good. There's some big concerns there for some things that don't expire very quickly. I mean, they didn't phase in the Inflation Reduction Act. They were boasting of shoving it out the door like bricks of gold off the Titanic when they implemented the Green New Deal and called it the Inflation Reduction Act. As we phase out these tax credits, people aren't very anxious to phase them out. They want to start doing it in 2029. Same with work requirements. I mean, most people they would help a friend or family member in need, but at some point you would say, well, you're going to get a job, right? Now, we don't really start saying that for several years. So we're kind of slow to implement the cuts. So that's a big concern. We'll see whether we have the votes.
Now, when you talk about, we're talking about these things, these are Republicans negotiating with themselves on this. And this is one of the liabilities, if you will, of being in the majority, with a majority that's made up of members from blue states who tend to be a little hesitant to approach a more conservative approach to government. But there's a demand by Republican voters to see substantive change, and this, if we can't do it now, when will that happen?
Yeah, it's kind of both ends. I mean, the moderates that don't want to cut anything are part of the problem. But then you're looking at, my reluctance is, well, look, you got to get the cuts like now, not some empty promise in the future. There are some people that definitely aren't going to vote for it unless they see faster cuts. And then on the other hand, you've got folks like, Josh Hawley out there. Oh, we can't cut Medicaid. We have working poor. Well, work requirements by definition don't affect the working poor. They're working. So it's kind of taken the bait that the Democrats are out there messaging that somehow the working poor are going to be affected by this bill. Nothing's getting cut for them. Nothing's getting cut for disabled kids or senior citizens. What it does is it expects an able-bodied adult with no dependent kids at home to eventually start looking for work. And frankly, it doesn't get around to that for years.
Just to be clear, a lot of those Republicans that are defending some of these Medicaid provisions, these are provisions that were put in place during the Biden administration, the expansion that took place. So, I mean, we're just trying to dial it back before the major expansion that took place during the Biden years.
Yeah, I mean, Obamacare, Biden years, the match is very generous for that expansion, which is often able-bodied adults. And it is fueling the bankruptcy of our country. If you look at the burn rate on healthcare, just like in your household, that's one of the big expenses that's hard to manage. Same for the federal government. It's out of control. And I'd rather see us do things that get it under control. And that's where I think the president's effort on prescription drugs should be well received.
All right. Congressman Warren Davidson, we have to leave it there. Always great to see you. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Tony. God bless you and all your listeners and viewers.